Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Breakpoint Show. It's July 2nd, 2024. Most people in the United States are pretty much shut down because it's a holiday week. And the people in Canada, I have to give a shout out to our friends and audience in Canada. Happy Canada Day yesterday. So if you didn't know, there's a big fireworks show that happens in between for Canada Day in Canada and July 4th in America. It's in Detroit, between Detroit and Windsor, and they have a big fireworks show to celebrate both holidays. So it's actually pretty cool. I've been there and seen it once. I have to say something. It's July 2nd. This year is going by so fast, isn't it?
Yeah, too fast. Can we slow down a little bit?
Yeah, please. Maybe COVID made our brains think that like time is going faster. But I have a theory on this, and it's kind of a philosophical, so bear with me. So you remember as a kid, your days felt like they lasted forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we've gotten older, our days feel like they're going faster and faster. So if you take the length of time, say like the length in days of our lives, a day becomes a smaller and smaller slice of the pie. If you looked at our life as a pie, right? A day becomes a smaller and smaller slice of our pie. And because it's become a smaller slice of the pie, it goes by quicker in the wheel of time. That's my philosophical view of metaphysical time and space. So
yeah, it sounds like a good theory.
You can call me Hawkins. So
I just figured it was because my brain is turning into mush. And
maybe that too. That too. So we are going to talk about just rants, some things that we're finding out that we discovered over the last couple weeks. Nothing too big. It's the middle of summer, dog days of summer. Everyone's out having a good time. We've all been on vacation, in and out, but we've discovered a few things. So I'm going to throw it over to Martin and let him kind of have the first say or the first topic thrown into the ring.
Sure. It's actually one that Khalid found earlier this week in the documentation sites on docs.microsoft.com, and it's about service discovery. So I think everyone by now has heard of Aspire and kind of has an idea of what it does. For those who still don't, no worries. It's a framework that allows you to link different projects and Docker containers and service dependencies and so on, and kind of orchestrate how you do local development for all of them. The orchestrator that is in Aspire sets things up, make sure that your application can find the database that you're running, for example, and things like that. Now, what's interesting here is that this new, what's the library called? It's called Microsoft.extensions.service discovery. Is part of Aspire, but has also been built as something that can also stand outside of Aspire. And it's a library that gives you the opportunity to put meaningful names for services that you might be using in your configuration files. So for example, you can do something like HTTPS backend, for example, and then have that backend point to either an actual service that sits in Azure or point it to something that you have locally. It doesn't really matter. The service discovery library will figure out what the actual URL is to use there for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's the cool part of it. But like you were saying, it's really Aspire agnostic. Like it was designed to work with Azure's Kubernetes service that they offer, or it can work with any Kubernetes installation. And it uses the virtual network inside of that Kubernetes configuration to do something like DNS. So the discovery isn't actually in the the package itself. It's just leveraging the APIs and the information found in your kind of Kubernetes-like environment. So it's very cool. I think it's really neat. Like service discovery, especially when you're building service-oriented applications, has kind of historically been the annoying part of connecting a service-oriented architecture together. And just naming things logically as to what they are, like backend, cache, that kind of stuff, and just calling it that, I think is super, super nice. So, but yeah, the thing that we didn't mention though is like it's really built as an HTTP handler that sits as middleware of your HTTP clients. So the thing we're noticing in .NET 9 is the HTTP client is really, really getting kind of geared up as kind of maybe one of the most important classes in all of .NET. And there's just a lot of functionality coming to the HTTP client that I think a lot of people maybe aren't noticing because it's under the covers.
Yeah. Well, I was surprised when Khalid said that he discovered there was an entire team at Microsoft dedicated just to the HTTP client, which I find really cool, and I think is awesome that that they are putting that much importance on it. Kind of goes along with the book I'm reading or writing, and I guess I'm going to have to do lots of updates when .NET 9 comes out, which will be okay. It'll be fun. I did learn, I saw a tweet or a post or somewhere last week about currently there is some ways to add resiliency to your HTTP apps, which if you've read my book or have any experience in this area, there's a great open source library or project called Poly that lets you do a lot of things like timeouts and retries and rate limiters and fallbacks and circuit breakers and stuff like that. All these different patterns for networking, programming, resiliency. But we're starting to see that kind of come into the .NET proper, which, you know, I'm gonna give my opinion. It makes me feel good and bad because it's nice that they're putting it as like a first-class citizen in .NET, but then I love open source projects that just fill a niche and do something good for the community and for the ecosystem. So it's kind of a mixed bag in my book. But anyone want to talk about like this resiliency?
Just a quick note on what you were just saying. I was quickly scanning the docs there, and it looks like the library has Poly underpinning a lot of the functionality that is there. So the Microsoft library is using Poly under the covers to make everything work.
Oh, so that's nice. They're just maybe aggregating up some of those patterns. Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think resiliency is something a lot of devs want in their applications, or they think they want it, but it's one of those things that if you don't have good telemetry, good logs, good tracing mechanisms in your application, it can actually end up leading to a lot of headaches and a lot of he said, she said kind of moments with your users, because you'll test it. It'll be super fast because it succeeds the first time. But there's a user out there who happens to always hit a fail state for some weird reason. And now their processes take like 30 seconds. So, you know, for me, it's like this stuff is really great. I definitely think it should be part of the HTTP client. That's a great addition. But it also kind of leans as to why Aspire also has a lot of open telemetry as part of its package offering, because resiliency without actually understanding when your resiliency kicks in can actually be a detriment, I think, to the user experience.
Yeah. Well, so I have a question. So what do you guys recommend for telemetry? What, I mean, because mostly these are paid services, because all that data has to be collected and put someplace. So usually these are some services that they have a cost. Now, if the cost is a third party or a cloud provider, there's still a cost. But what do you guys recommend?
I think it really depends. I'm personally still using Azure Application Insights for speaker travel, which I'm building. I am thinking about migrating towards open telemetry there, because Azure is also in Azure Monitor, so the service underpinning Application Insights. It is also exposing an open telemetry compatible API where you can just push in all of the data that you want. And I'm thinking to just go full in on open telemetry, because it's there, everyone's using it. There's lots of documentations, examples on how to use it and so on. And for me, for analyzing the data, not much changes because the server side still stays the same. But collecting the telemetry at least is becoming something that is more standard and less tied to one vendor.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think open telemetry is kind of the future of just kind of tracking your application. So I think .NET has done a lot to kind of add open telemetry through like activity source. So in a sense, you're probably already have a lot of the open telemetry machinery in your application. You're probably just not sending that information anywhere in particular. So, and I think that's what's really going to be the most benefit for a lot of people. It's not that they're going to sit there and add open telemetry to their application. It's a lot of their third-party dependencies, like the way they access their database, or the way they call Redis, or the way that they call an Azure API. All of those libraries will already have the open telemetry, data coming out of them, and you essentially just have to opt into it. So that's kind of where the wind is going, open telemetry, instead of having these huge logs that you really can't parse because there's just too much information. Yeah. Open telemetry will make things a little easier to understand.
Awesome.
Yeah. In addition, I do think that, for example, Aspire, I see a lot of people on social media and so on trying it out. They're all raving about the dashboard that you get. So first of all, you can run that dashboard as an open telemetry collector, so you get all the data in there. It's not persistent, so if you reboot the instance that is running the dashboard, you lose all of the data that you had in there before. But that really doesn't matter because it's mostly for development purposes. But the cool thing is that I think it's opens up the idea of telemetry to a lot of people who might not have tried it before. And it's really useful to do things like tracing, to correlate logs to what activity was going on in the application and so on. And if anything, I think that's a great thing that Aspire is introducing in our community as a whole.
Yeah, I don't think we fully utilize as developers a lot of this analytical data that our applications generate. Like how many developers that use like Entity Framework Core and SQL Server actually go into SQL Server and take a look at all the data that is generated for queries and CRUD calls in SQL Server. So I mean, there's tons of data to improve our applications and stuff in there too. So I think it's great. I think it's good that we, as developers, we have a easier path to that type of work and that type of feedback.
Yeah, I will say too, like Martin mentioned, application insights and open telemetry and even the Spire dashboard. The nice thing is when a user comes to you and they're explaining something was slow or something didn't work, you can typically go find their session and see and follow directly the path that user took. So
Yep.
for me, the huge benefit of a lot of these tools is they're like empathy building tools for you and your users. Like, instead of like them trying to explain the feeling that they had, you now have data to back up the feeling that they had, whether it's a positive feeling like, whoa, that was really fast. Well, we can go look at the traces and it only took 100 milliseconds to do this really expensive operation, or man, that was really painful. I don't know what was going on. You could look at a trace that took 30 seconds and be like, well, break it down. So.
Yeah. Well, what would happen if you actually went to a user and went, hey, I saw yesterday that you were having a hard time with such and such because we were getting messages because thresholds were passed and blah, blah, blah. And hey, can you explain what you were doing yesterday afternoon in regards to like this area of the application?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll blow a user's mind if you actually come to them and tell them the problem that they were having. One, you'll get much more respect, and you'll get a lot more buy-in from your users, especially if you're at a corporation building in-house applications. You'll get that confidence that the users will now come to you and tell you more about their experiences, and not just kind of brush it off and say, hey, these developers, they'll never help me kind of with this problem.
Mm-hmm. Agree, 100% agree.
I also think tying this back into resiliency, it gives you an insight in your dependencies as well. So let's say you use this new library or just poly as is as a way to retry operations, for example, or as a circuit breaker or whatever. You could add telemetry to that. Even, well, it might actually be there. I haven't checked yet. But you can get telemetry on how often a certain dependency has been failing or has been slow or whatever. So you can maybe also talk to your vendors and make the software as a whole, including your dependencies, much better than what it was before.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. I love that.
I'm thinking about the HTTP client, like I'm reading the documentation here, and I'm just thinking about, developers, HTTP has really become something that is like a go-to in our toolbox. And I'm curious if we should have just a general handler in .NET. I wonder if there is like a general handler where a lot of this machinery could be used for things like gRPC, or used for, a structured binary format that goes across the wire, but still have kind of this resiliency handler shared amongst those things. Because HTTP is nice, but there is definitely some overhead, right? There's a serialization, deserialization process that I think a lot of times in a corporate environment, you don't actually necessarily need, because you know who the client is and you know who the, service that you're calling is. Yeah. So HTTP might be a little overkill, but looking at, the resiliency and service discovery, like some of these things would be super nice to just have as like foundational to building handlers just in general. But I don't know if that exists or not, but yeah.
Yeah. Have you guys looked at Quick, QUIC?
Yep.
It's a new protocol that people are thinking may replace TCP as the underpinning of the internet, because I mean, really you have TCP/IP and then you have HTTP that sits on top of it, and not trying to get too much into the weeds, but it's actually the underlining TCP/IP that actually takes that data, breaks it up into packets, and then sends it out. And those packets go off in whatever path that they go to, and then they get reassembled back at the thing. And that's really what causes most of the latency that we experience in the internet.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have direct communication. I mean, we have in the past, if anyone remembers, like networking protocols like Vines and some of the Cisco some of the original like corporate networking protocols, just send it across the wire, and it didn't have the say the resiliency of packet transfers like TCP/IP, but yeah, QUIC is this new protocol that uses more. It leverages UDP
Mm-hmm.
On the back end. So, do you guys know much about it?
No, I will claim ignorance.
No. Okay,
I've read up on it, and essentially HTTP3, which you might see, is actually an evolution or similar to what QUIC is doing. So it might actually be that while we are recording here in our browser, that we are using HTTP3 and QUIC under the hood to get this recording done.
Yeah. There's so many interesting things. If you go out to the W3 webpage and just take a look at some of their like open kind of their projects that they're looking at, and kind of in committee and stuff, there's some wild stuff out there. So that's kind of cool for everyone.
Well, you know, I'm looking at, again, I'm going back to the documentation of the resiliency package. This is kind of .NET related question for both of you. Like, clearly the builder pattern is a big part of .NET just in general. And at this point, everything is very explicit in terms of like calling these methods, passing in configuration, setting up these objects. Are we getting to a point where there's just so much builder code in .NET that it becomes like overwhelming? Because I know there's like some safe defaults out of the box, but I'm starting to feel like 80% of a .NET application lives in program.cs at this point.
It's all ceremony.
Well, I wouldn't say, I don't know if ceremony is the right word, but it's very like tedious. It's very like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, every time I add a new functionality, it's more C# code.
I get what you're saying, but if you think back to the days where we were hosting ASP.NET web forms, or maybe later even MVC on top of IIS, where you had to replace some handlers, some modules, add some configuration, tweak the cache settings for a certain path that is there, maybe disable or enable content compression on some path. Essentially, I think that was a worse situation where we're all defining all of that in an XML file instead of our program.cs.
Hey, bring back the app config. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But
okay. I don't think so much has changed there, except for the fact that you can now put breakpoints in there, step through, see what's going on under the hoods, without you having to read some obscure, outdated, maybe documentation on what a certain XML element and attributes actually meant in your application.
Well, I mean, the problem with what you're saying, Khalid, is network programming. What people need with network programming all depends on what their business requirements really are. I mean, you hit on it. If you're building an application that's in-house that connects all the computers in a safe environment, you don't need that much. Like, you don't need that much overhead. You might need that to configure. But if you're building a commercial product or building a product that actually goes across the internet out in the wild, you need a little bit more support for it. So So where do they draw that line? Do they draw it for in-house, like in-house application developers, or application developers that are kind of doing a lot of stuff outside the corporate walls?
Well, the thing I'm always reminded of is like the .NET team's biggest customer is always Microsoft, right? So when you think about the configurability of this stuff, and you think about like maybe I'll use the word flexibility, the flexibility of all these APIs and the knobs that you're given to turn, it makes a lot of sense when you think about the corporate environment and solutions that, you know, essentially one of the world's biggest companies is using this stuff, right? So it makes sense from that standpoint. But from a .NET perspective, it's funny to think like there's also these like mom and pop small businesses trying to essentially build on top of this enterprise like software with success.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, maybe they don't need everything that's offered out of the box.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice to go, hey, like, what level do you need? And there's already pre-configured kind of settings for that. But that would turn .NET into like what I used to do with Power Builder, and just be have a WYSIWYG and drop stuff down and set properties and stuff like that. So,
well, let me ask you one more thing, right? So we talked about service discovery, we talked about resiliency, and you know, this is all code based. This is all C#. This all runs on your .NET runtime that you choose. You know, I would say like 10 years ago, platform as a service was like really being pushed as the thing that a lot of developers wanted. Like in my naive questioning, I would ask like, why isn't service discovery and resiliency just part of whatever platform you're deploying to? Why does it get surfaced inside of code, right? Like, shouldn't there be an HTTP broker between your services that when you call it, it can handle a fail state and resiliency and stuff like that?
Question there is that something that the platform can give you in a reliable way? So imagine, and this is just an example that I just thought of for speaker travel, for example, if I call an API that does ticketing and that takes money from my accounts, do I really want my platform to run that 100 times for me if that call fails or times out?
I mean, you do. You'll get rich.
No, I lose the money in that case.
No, he loses the money because
he loses the money.
He's paying the travel organizations, the airlines and the train transport.
Yeah, I guess you're,
but I would like to control it in that case, where for some calls I can actually opt out of that behavior, and maybe given how we build software, it is safer to assume that you always have to opt in to that behavior, which is what the resilience package does.
I got you. Yeah, that's good reasoning. I mean, I think, yeah, it does make sense. And I think if people want a platform resiliency model, maybe they should opt into something like a message queue or something like that has that functionality built into it. So communication and resiliency is built at like the infrastructure level rather than your application level. So it's all interesting. I think this stuff is pretty cool. I'd like to see examples of this being used outside of Aspire, just to see what folks end up doing with it.
I was going to ask, like, if this can live external from Aspire, have you seen anyone do anything with it that's independent of Aspire? Or it will be cool to see what people are doing with it, I guess.
Yeah, I
guess it's still too new to find many examples of it being used in the wild, but it's definitely a cool one, and I hope it gets used. And I'm going to have a close look at it because I see some cases for myself there as well.
Well, we're trying to keep this around 30 minutes, this talk. are there any closing thoughts or things that you want to bring up that we didn't this morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where we are and where people are,
the joy of time zones
are listening. Yeah. And when people are listening to this.
I don't know. I guess for me, I'm like excited about some of the bits of this stuff that we're seeing come to .NET. I'm still curious about the adoption rate of all of this and whether the .NET community, again, like when we think about .NET, you have to realize that there's like the corporate customers of the .NET team, which is Microsoft and maybe some of those bigger Fortune 100 companies. But then there's also like a broader .NET community. And ultimately, it's like, is it okay to have a small percentage of adoption for some of these features and have the .NET team focus on these because they're big fish? Or ultimately, like,
Sure.
like focus on broad appeal of features and stuff like that. So, and I'm not sure if these features are very niche or very broad appealing. I think time will tell, but I'm still always curious about, where the resources and time and effort are going into expanding .NET. So,
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page as you there. I am interested in, for example, this service discovery thing. Aspire, good to know. I don't see an actual use to change whatever I'm using right now to switch to Aspire. But I do see these bits as being useful in a variety of architectures. And I can only hope that marketing at Microsoft, for example, at some point is also going to highlight the individual bits because they might prove more valuable in many cases than the finished, polished products that you can also use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and my final thought is all this talk is just making people aware that they should go out and read my book. If you go out to C# and spell that out, C# as a word, network.com. You'll find my book out there. It's free to read. It's going to be coming to LeanPub soon, so you'll be able to buy a printed copy. And I got through the first half, the basic chapters. Now I'm getting into more like the different ways to do things, like as we talked about gRPC and HTTP and all the kind of different products or features or open source libraries that use networking and stuff. So stay tuned. I might even throw, since we're talking about it, maybe open telemetry and how to use it with networking programming might be a good chapter to do for the book. So
cool.
But
all right,
cool. Well,
let's ask people again. You're watching the Breakpoint Show, so be sure to like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll put out some good content.
Yeah, let us know who we're looking for new guests. So recommend someone that you would like to come on the show and talk to us about something. And but with that, thank you for kind of giving us some time talking. We talked about time in the beginning, but thank you for giving us a sliver of your time today. And we really appreciate it. I appreciate and respect both of these gentlemen for the time that they spend with me. And I hope everyone has a good summer. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.